My parents gave the house to my sister, even though I was the one who paid the full price for it. I didn't just grow up in that house, I grew up for it. The Maple Street house had always been more than a roof and walls. It was ritual and rhythm. The creak of the stairwell before breakfast, the fading marks on the hallway wall that tracked our heights year after year. The smell of lemon-scented floor polish mixed with whatever dinner Mom was experimenting with that night. That house had seen my first steps, my first panic attack before the SATs, the sleepless nights during college breaks when I returned to paint walls, fix gutters, and mow a lawn that was never mine, but always felt like home. I ran my fingers along the edge of the banister now, the wood smooth from decades of wear. This time, I wasn't home for a holiday. I was here to talk numbers. The house was behind on payments. Again. But before I opened my laptop and looked at mortgage calculators, my mind drifted, like it always did, back to the start. When Sophie was born, I was 5, old enough to recognize the way the air shifted. Baby Sophie became the sun around which everything revolved. At first, it was small things. Her toys didn't have to be put away. Her tantrums were cute. Her sleep schedule dictated our lives. But those small allowances evolved into something bigger. At 10, I asked for a sleepover party with a few friends. My mom said it wasn't in the budget. 3 months later, Sophie's 5th birthday included a rented bounce house and a magician who made live doves appear in our living room. I remember sitting by the kitchen window that day, counting the cars pulling into the driveway. One for every child in her class. Not a single one for me, but I was the responsible one. That's what they always said. Claire doesn't need as much. She's independent. She understands. And maybe I did. Maybe I understood that love in our house was measured by how little you asked for. So I worked. Babysitting by 14, grocery cashier by 16, state university on a partial scholarship and 3 jobs. Meanwhile, Sophie floated between passions, first ballet, then theater, then horseback riding lessons. When she quit them all after a few weeks, Mom would smile and say, "She's just trying to find herself." I never had that luxury, but I didn't resent the work, because it brought me here, back to this house. Back to these rooms, where I now stood not as a child, but as a professional. A real estate agent who knew the value of square footage and neighborhood ratings and generational equity. This wasn't just my childhood home. It was their only asset. And it was in trouble. My dad had called me a week ago, his voice gravelly over the phone. "It's just temporary," he'd said. "The firm's downsizing. I've got interviews lined up." He didn't mention how Mom's arthritis had worsened or how her medical bills were stacking up. I found out when I stopped by and saw the unopened envelopes in the kitchen. That night, I stayed up past midnight at my apartment, calculator in hand, running numbers. What could I afford to send each month? Could I pause my retirement contributions? Was this smart? Logical? It didn't matter. Because the next morning, I told them I'd help. "I'll take care of the mortgage," I said. "Until things stabilize, we'll keep the house safe." Dad looked down at his coffee, swallowing hard. Mom's eyes glistened. She reached for my hand, held it tight. "This house, it's your legacy," she said. "We'll never forget this, Claire." Later that afternoon, I sat at the small table in the dining room, the same place where I'd done algebra homework, where we'd carved Thanksgiving turkeys. I signed the first bank transfer, pushing away the knot forming in my stomach. That's when Mom leaned in, her voice low, almost reverent. "This house will be yours someday. We won't forget." When my parents hit rock bottom, I didn't think twice. That was my mistake. The job leads dried up faster than Dad's optimism. Every time I called, his voice sounded thinner, less sure. "They're looking for someone younger," he admitted once. Fresh talent, lower salary expectations. It had been 6 months since the firm let him go. The severance package was long gone. And Mom's health? That was a slow burn no one wanted to name out loud. Her arthritis turned from a nuisance into a daily battle. Stiff mornings, doctor visits, a new prescription every month. At first, I told myself it was a temporary bridge, just enough help to get them back on their feet. I'd cover the mortgage for now, then maybe the utilities, then groceries, then a few just-in-case transfers when the water heater failed or the car wouldn't start. I watched it all add up from my laptop in my one-bedroom condo. The condo I'd worked 3 jobs to afford. I loved that place. It was mine. The gray couch near the window that sagged slightly on one side. The half-full wine rack that made me look more social than I was. The blank space near the kitchen bar where I'd planned to put a bookshelf or maybe a breakfast nook. I hadn't decided yet. Now, it didn't matter, because every month $2,000 left my account before I even noticed it was there. I set up the recurring transfer on a quiet Tuesday morning. The same kind of morning where the sun sliced through my blinds in perfect angles, warming up the hardwood floor. I remember clicking confirm with a lump in my throat and my jaw tight. That's how I knew I was convincing myself this was the right thing. Dad thanked me in his way. Stoic, a nod, maybe a pat on the back. But Mom? She folded me into a hug the next time I visited and whispered, "This is still your inheritance. You're not giving this away. You're just holding the line until we can take over again." The roof had started leaking by April. Dad mentioned it like it was gossip. Casual, buried under weather complaints and neighborhood updates. "We had a bit of rain last week. Some water got in through the attic. We'll patch it up eventually." I knew that tone. It was the same one he used when he didn't want to admit something was beyond him. I dipped into my annual bonus, $8,000. I had planned to use it for a marketing certification course, maybe even a short trip out west. Instead, I used every cent to pay for new shingles and a revised home insurance policy. I even found the contractor myself. Efficient, affordable, non-judgmental. Just a little longer, I told myself as I filed the emailed receipt in a new folder called Family Expenses. The strange part was how easily it became routine. I started visiting on weekends to mow the lawn, replace filters, tighten wobbly cabinet hinges. I began leaving the garage code in my phone's notes app, just in case Mom needed me when Dad wasn't around. She started calling me the glue of this family. It was meant as praise, but it felt like a warning. Glue cracks under pressure, too. I told Naomi once, over a hurried lunch between showings. She stared at me between bites of salad. "Claire, you realize they're not keeping track of any of this, right?" "They said it's my inheritance." I shrugged. "They said?" she repeated, eyebrows raised. I didn't argue. Because I wanted to believe that love meant something, that being there counted for something. That night, back in my condo, I stared at the corner where I'd meant to put a new reading chair. I stood in that space for a long time, imagining the warm leather, the soft lamp, the calm. But all I saw was emptiness. "It's just temporary," I whispered. "It's for family." Sophie lived on applause. I lived on invoices. She glowed, even under bad lighting. It wasn't just the highlighter dusted along her cheekbones or the fitted tank tops that showed just enough collarbone to be trendy. But Zen, it was the way she moved through the world, as if it would catch her if she ever fell. She taught yoga classes 3 days a week at a boutique studio nestled between a vegan cafe and a high-end crystal shop in Lincoln Park. Her business card said mindfulness coach. Her Instagram said healing through movement and light. I once joked that my tax documents could use some healing. I paid for the new water heater that month. The old one had burst during a cold snap, flooding the laundry room and leaving Mom and Dad without hot showers. I Venmo'd the plumber before I even got off the call with him. The receipt went into the family expenses folder like all the rest. When I visited that weekend, no one said thank you. The conversation at dinner was about sage bundles and ring sizes. Sophie had a new boyfriend, Ethan Whitaker. Tall, absurdly symmetrical, and the kind of guy whose casual loafers cost more than my monthly insurance premiums. She'd met him at a fundraiser she attended with a client. His family owned a string of luxury car dealerships across the Midwest. Not new money, Mom had whispered. Legacy. Suddenly, everything revolved around him, or more precisely, around them. Linda hosted brunches where she made lemon ricotta pancakes and floated around in linen, acting like a character in a Nancy Meyers movie. She'd started using phrases like bridal energy and classic silhouettes. Dad nodded his way through every conversation, present but fading like wallpaper. Ethan joined one dinner. He brought flowers, held Sophie's chair, and said things like, future-facing investments. I brought wine. No one opened it. One Sunday in December, Sophie announced they were officially engaged. She'd said yes on a cliffside in Sedona. There was a drone and a violinist. Linda cried when Sophie showed the video on her phone. I tried to match the family's tone, excited, hopeful, but my applause felt off-tempo. I had listings to prepare, a client in escrow and a broken faucet in my bathroom I hadn't gotten around to fixing. That evening, after the cake and champagne, I found myself alone in the kitchen scraping plates. Through the archway into the dining room, I heard their voices, faint but unmistakable. She needs this, Mom said. She's starting her real life. It should be beautiful. There was a pause, then Dad's voice. Careful, rehearsed. The gift will change Sophie's life. It's what they need to start strong. A cold bloom opened in my chest. I carried the plates to the sink, then returned to the table. The room had that warm, fuzzy exhaustion of a family gathering winding down. Sophie was curled into Ethan's side, laughing. Linda was pouring coffee. I sat, picked up my fork, and cut into the last bite of pie. Then I asked, what gift? The room went quiet. Just for a second. Long enough. No one looked at me. No one answered. I never thought my world would end over crab cakes and champagne. The valet barely glanced at my 8-year-old sedan as he handed me the stub. I adjusted the hem of my black sheath dress, tasteful, business casual, dependable, and stepped into a country club foyer that looked ripped from a bridal magazine. Gold sconces lined the hallway. Strings of orchids hung from the ceiling like a curated jungle. And the hum of laughter, polished, practiced, floated above the sound of string quartet renditions of 2000s pop songs. Sophie's engagement party had started 30 minutes earlier. I was late from back-to-back showings, and I hadn't had time to change into anything more extravagant. As I stepped into the main ballroom, I immediately felt it. How loud my shoes were against the marble. How dim my dress looked next to the shimmering chiffon and pearl tones of the other guests. I scanned for familiar faces and found my parents standing near the bar, laughing too comfortably with a couple in matching navy suits. Ethan's parents, probably. Dad was animated, drink in hand, nodding along like a man who belonged. Linda was glowing, radiant in a cream dress that flared at her waist, her makeup heavier than I'd ever seen it. No one saw me at first. I wandered to the buffet and picked up a single crab cake, unsure where to stand. I spotted Sophie across the room, surrounded by women in gold heels and sharp cheekbones. She didn't wave. I moved to the far side of the room and stood by a tall window, pretending to admire the view of the golf course. Behind me, conversations floated past. Chatter about summer homes, destination honeymoons, private schools. I'd closed deals for people like this, but I'd never stood among them socially, and certainly not as a background character in my own family. Then I heard it. My mother's voice, low but clear enough as she leaned toward a woman in lavender silk. It'll be the perfect foundation for their new life. Symbolic, permanent. The woman nodded knowingly. You can't buy that kind of legacy. My throat tightened. I turned toward them instinctively, but they shifted the conversation as soon as they saw me looking. My mother waved, then disappeared into a cluster of Ethan's aunts. Later, Sophie passed me on the way to the dance floor. Her hand brushed my arm. Not affectionately, more like I was an obstruction. Didn't know you were coming, she said, sipping her champagne. Got the invite, I replied. She smiled without meeting my eyes. You always show up for family. I wanted to say something. Anything. But all that came out was a quiet, sure. Dinner was plated. 5 courses announced by uniformed servers. I barely touched mine. Instead, I watched my parents glow in their roles. Gracious, generous, bursting with pride. I'd seen them tired, anxious, even beaten down by bills and diagnoses. But tonight, they were transformed. And somehow, the transformation didn't include me. When it was time for speeches, my father stood. He tapped his glass and the room hushed in that effortless way expensive rooms do. We've watched Sophie grow into a remarkable young woman, he began. And Ethan, well, from the moment he walked into our lives, we knew he'd become part of it forever. He talked about love, about family, about building a future. And as parents, he said, glancing at Linda, we dreamed of giving our children a strong start, a gift to anchor their beginnings, something meaningful, something lasting. A few guests murmured approval. Linda beamed. Claire felt her stomach drop. Though we're not revealing everything just yet, Dad continued, let's just say Sophie and Ethan's next chapter will be built on a solid foundation. Applause erupted. I clapped too, because not clapping would have made it worse. But my hands moved on autopilot. My mind was elsewhere, running numbers, replaying phrases, digging into 5 years of words that now tasted like ash. Then I saw it. Across the room, Sophie turned toward our mother and winked. I paid for their roof, their groceries, their promises, $165,000 worth. The number stared back at me from the glowing spreadsheet on my laptop, steady and damning. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, the cursor blinking beside the cell that tallied the totals. Rent support, medical bills, property tax, the roof, the furnace, the endless little emergencies that had names but no receipts. 60 months of mortgage payments at $2,000 a month. That alone was $120,000. Add the extras, and it ballooned. I scrolled up and down the list, stomach clenched, like I was sifting through the scene of a slow-moving crime I'd accidentally committed against myself. It was past midnight. The city outside was hushed, and my apartment was too quiet in the way only betrayal can make it. I grabbed my phone and texted Naomi. Still awake? Need to talk. Urgent. The dots appeared almost instantly. Always. Call me. I didn't bother with small talk. I added it all up, I said. Added what? My help. Everything I paid for. All of it. I heard her sit upright, sheets rustling. You're kidding. Mortgage, groceries, insurance. That time the foundation cracked. The roof, the water heater. Doctor visits. Meds. And $165,000, I said. There was a pause. Then, Claire. Jesus. I could have put a down payment on a 2-flat in Evanston, I murmured. I could have bought my own lake house, started passive income, built equity. Hell, I could have taken a break from working double shifts. Naomi's voice sharpened. Was any of this written down? An agreement? Numbered just promises. Mom said it was my legacy, that it would all come back to me. She said the house would be mine someday. And now they're giving it to Sophie. The silence stretched, then cracked under the weight of truth. They stole from you, she said softly. No, I said, my voice low but firm. If they gave Sophie the house, then they stole from me. I leaned back, letting the sentence settle around me. It wasn't just disappointment anymore. It was violation. The kind that creeps in through the cracks of trust you didn't know were there. Naomi didn't speak right away. When she did, her tone was steel. You need to confront them. Soon. I was raised to smile, stay quiet, and not ask why I got less. Easter brunch at the Maple Street house used to mean pastel napkins, deviled eggs, and tulips. Mom cut from the backyard. This year, the flowers were store-bought, the table was longer, and Sophie's laugh echoed from the living room where she was showing Ethan the old photo albums like she owned them. I sat between my parents at the end of the table, a fresh-baked quiche steaming in front of me. I hadn't eaten much. My appetite soured somewhere between the second round of mimosas and the moment I caught Linda gazing wistfully at Sophie's engagement ring as if it were some holy relic. I let the idle chatter swirl: Ethan's new promotion, Sophie's Pilates certification, the weather in Sedona. Then, with deliberate calm, I placed my fork down and asked, "So, what is the gift?" The room thinned. Sophie glanced over her shoulder but quickly turned back to Ethan. Dad's hand paused mid-cut of ham. Linda blinked. "What gift, sweetheart?" she asked with an exaggerated smile. "The one that'll be the perfect foundation for Sophie and Ethan's future. You mentioned it at the engagement party." Linda dabbed her mouth with a cloth napkin. "Oh, that. It's just ideas we've been floating. Nothing's finalized." "Really?" I tilted my head, because it sounded pretty final when Dad made that toast. You know, the one about a life-changing gift. Edward shifted in his chair. "Claire," he said, clearing his throat. "We just wanted to help them start their family strong, like any parents would." "And what about the 5 years I spent helping you keep this house?" My voice was even, but I could feel my pulse in my temples. "The payments, the repairs, the medical bills. You said it was temporary. You said it was mine someday." Linda's smile vanished. "You're successful," she said, voice clipped. "You'll be fine." It landed like a slap, not shouted, not cruel, just matter of fact, as if success meant immunity to betrayal. I pushed my chair back slowly. The legs scraped against the hardwood, and for a second it was the only sound in the room. "Then you don't need my money anymore." I stood. No one moved. Not Sophie, not Ethan, certainly not my parents. "That's not fair, Claire," Edward muttered, but his voice was thin, weak. I didn't respond. I walked out. I came to drop off a birthday gift. I left with the sinking certainty I'd been erased. The air outside was sticky with early summer. I hadn't been back to the Maple Street house in over a month, and the blooming azaleas lining the porch looked strangely cheerful for a place that now felt more like a stage than a home. I hadn't told them I was coming. Just grabbed a wrapped box, linen scarves, and a gift card to the local spa, and figured I'd drop it off. Quick and clean. In and out. No confrontation. Maybe even some neutral small talk if we were lucky. The front door was unlocked, like always. I pushed it open and called out, "Mom?" Voices drifted from the dining room. Low, measured, not laughter, not casual. I stepped into the hallway, heels quiet on the wood floor. The smell of coffee lingered in the air, mixing with something sterile. Ink? Paper? When I reached the dining room, I froze. Linda and Edward were seated across from a stranger in a navy suit. The table was covered in documents, manila folders, and a notary stamp. The man looked up at me first, then my mother turned, her smile faltering. "Claire, we weren't expecting you." I didn't move. "Just dropping off your birthday gift." Edward stood, awkward. "This is Mr. Patterson. He's helping us get some affairs in order." The lawyer gave a polite nod but didn't elaborate. Linda began gathering papers quickly, folding them into a folder. "You know how it is," she said, breezy but tight. "Just making sure everything's neat for later, wills and such." I walked forward slowly, placed the gift on the sideboard. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Perfectly fine," Edward said too fast. "We were just wrapping up." I glanced at the documents now tucked away. One had the seal of Cook County visible for a heartbeat. Real estate. Transfers. Something coiled in my chest. "Coffee?" Linda offered. "No, I've got a showing in an hour." I smiled. Thin. Didn't mean to interrupt. "You didn't," she said, though her hands were still fidgeting with the edges of the folder. Edward patted my shoulder as he walked me toward the door. "Good to see you, sweetheart." At the threshold, he added, offhand, almost as an afterthought, "Soon you won't have to worry about the house anymore." I left before my face could betray anything. The drive home was a blur. I didn't listen to music. I didn't stop for lunch. That night, I poured a glass of wine, opened my laptop, and navigated to the Cook County Recorder's property portal. I entered the address, clicked through. There it was. On file. Dated 6 weeks ago. Deed transferred from Edward and Linda Morgan to Sophie Morgan and Ethan Whitaker. They didn't just take the house. They wrapped it in ribbon and called it love. The Palmer house shimmered in gold and ivory like a dream pulled from a bridal catalog. Thousands of roses lined the entry. A string quartet played something soft and sentimental. Servers glided through the halls with champagne flutes balanced like weapons. I'd been up since dawn. Hair, makeup, coordinating bridesmaids, calming Sophie when the monogrammed napkins arrived in silver instead of gold. It was all noise. Numb noise. I smiled in photos. I zipped dresses. I fixed veils. But I felt like a placeholder. Someone hired to play supportive sister on a stage I never asked to stand on. At the altar, Sophie glowed. Ethan looked proud. The guests murmured awe. Linda dabbed her eyes beside Edward, both of them radiant in a way I hadn't seen in years. Like life had bloomed back into them the second someone else needed it more. I stood a few feet away as they said their vows, watching it unfold like a movie I wasn't cast in. At the reception, beneath glittering chandeliers and soft candlelight, I sat at the family table, counting each second until it ended. Sophie floated from group to group like royalty. Ethan's family adored her. The waitstaff hovered. Everyone had a role to play. Mine was quiet. Then Dad tapped his champagne glass. The room fell silent. He stood beside Mom, one arm around her shoulders, and looked out at the 100 or so guests with misty eyes. Today, he began, we celebrate not just the love between Sophie and Ethan, but the beginning of their legacy. I gripped the stem of my glass. For 30 years, Linda and I have built our home on love, on traditions, on family. That house has seen birthdays, scraped knees, school projects, and late-night heart-to-hearts. It's more than walls. It's a foundation. Guests smiled, nodded. And we wanted Sophie and Ethan to start with that same strength. So tonight, we're giving them our home. The house where Sophie grew up. Now, the house where their future begins. Applause, gasps of admiration, a standing ovation from Ethan's side of the room. Sophie cried, clutched Ethan's hand, whispered something too soft to hear. Linda glowed. My champagne glass shook in my grip. The applause blurred. My pulse drummed in my ears. No one looked at me, not even once. Later that night, still in my bridesmaid gown, I drove to Maple Street. I didn't knock. I didn't go inside. I parked in the driveway and waited. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I asked a single question that made them flinch. Their car pulled into the driveway just after midnight. The headlights splashed across my parked vehicle, but neither of them seemed surprised to see me. Maybe they thought I'd come to congratulate them. Maybe they were too tired to care. They stepped out slowly, Linda still in her satin wrap, Edward loosening his tie like it had choked him for hours. They both looked older than they had at the reception. Less polished, more real. I opened the front door before they could. They followed me inside like guests in a home that no longer felt like mine. The living room was dim, only the lamp near the bookshelf casting its amber glow. We stood in the space where, months ago, they'd signed my silence away to Sophie. I didn't pace. I didn't fidget. I stood in front of the fireplace and waited for them to sit. They didn't. Why? I asked. Did you give away something I paid for? Edward's eyes dropped to the carpet. Linda crossed her arms. Claire, he said, measured. It's still our name on the deed. Legally. Linda stepped in. We appreciated your help, but you never asked for anything in writing. That was your choice. My breath caught, not from surprise, but from the clarity of it. They had rehearsed this. Maybe not word for word, but enough to know where each would stand when the lights came up. You looked me in the eye. I said, and told me this house would be mine someday. It was sentimental, Linda said quickly. We were emotional. You were helping us and we were grateful. You were manipulating me. Edward stiffened. That's not fair. Isn't it? I asked. You used my money, my time, my belief in this family, just to hand everything to Sophie, like she earned it. She's starting a family, Linda said. She needed stability. I needed honesty, I said, but I guess that was never on the table. The room pressed in tighter. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. From this moment on, I'm not your safety net. I'm not your fixer. I'm not your daughter who stays silent. Linda's mouth opened. You're overreacting. I turned toward the door. No, I said, calm and final. I'm finally reacting. Some people weaponize gossip. I had Excel. The apartment was silent, save for the soft tapping of keys and the hum of the fan beside my desk. Outside, Chicago summer pulsed. Sirens, laughter, the distant thud of bass. But none of it reached me. Not tonight. Tonight, it was just me, my laptop, and the truth laid bare in rows and columns. Mortgage payments, $2,000 a month. Repairs, $6,400 for the roof, $3,200 for plumbing, $800 for a new water heater. Property taxes, home insurance, emergency grocery runs. Line by line, I typed it out. 5 years of deposits, receipts, checks. I color-coded by year. Highlighted the spikes during winter months when they'd needed extra help. And for every one-time payment, I found 3 more that followed. The final number stared back at me. $165,492. That didn't include interest or emotional debt. I sat back, hand resting over my mouth, breathing through the dull burn in my chest. Naomi FaceTime just past 10. I tilted the camera so she couldn't see the spreadsheet. You okay? She asked. I nodded. Productive. Claire, she said, sharp and gentle all at once. You need to talk to someone. A lawyer. I'm not suing my parents. Why not? If a stranger did this to you, you'd already have a deposition drafted. I didn't answer. I'm not saying take them to court tomorrow. She softened. Just know your rights. Get facts. Power comes from knowing. After we hung up, I sat staring at the blinking cursor in the file name. I moved my fingers slowly over the keyboard and renamed it. What they took .xls. At work, Ryan had started noticing the shift. I no longer lingered in the break room. I didn't offer to cover open houses or organize Friday happy hours. My laugh was gone. My emails were shorter. You okay? He asked once, glancing over our listing photos. Focused, I said. Focused was the truth. Focused on what came next. I closed the laptop, opened my calendar, and booked a consultation with a property attorney. Not to burn the house down. Not yet. Just to see where the exits were. They didn't just give away my house. They edited me out of the family photo. I was in the middle of drafting a listing description for a lakefront property when I saw it. Sophie's Instagram post, glowing on my phone like a dagger wrapped in pastel filters. Kitchen transformation complete. New quartz counters, gold fixtures, a massive farmhouse sink where Mom used to peel apples for pies I baked. Couldn't have done it without the love and support of family. Blessed Asha homeowners, start off fresh. I stared at the screen until the image blurred. The kitchen I had helped maintain for years now sparkled with renovations I hadn't known were even planned. The garden was gone. The wallpaper we'd fought over in 1998? Ripped out. The house wasn't being inherited. It was being rewritten. Ryan poked his head into my office. You heading to the broker's meeting? I nodded. Give me 5. He hesitated. You good? Peachy. I lied, tapping my screen off. After work, I scrolled deeper. Sophie and Ethan had documented the entire renovation like it was an HGTV special. New floors, Repainting. That damn hot tub installation. The backyard had once been Mom's pride. Now it looked like a resort. The captions always circled back to gratitude. Our dream made possible by love. Funny how love apparently came in the form of silent theft. My phone buzzed. Linda. Hey, sweetheart, just thinking of you. Let's do a brunch soon. Family's important. No acknowledgement of the wedding night, no mention of the confrontation, just a glossy attempt at patchwork over a jagged wound. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened a new tab on my laptop, drafted a headline. I paid for the house my sister was gifted. The words spilled out. 5 years of quiet sacrifice. Receipts, memories, promises that dissolved into silence. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. I posted it anonymously on Medium and closed the laptop. It wasn't revenge. It was a record. When I woke up the next morning, the article had over 14,000 views. If silence is survival, then I was done surviving. By Monday morning, the blog post had crossed 60,000 views. It was shared by 2 local influencers, a financial abuse survivor network, and a trending Reddit thread titled, "Sister Stole My House." Sort of. I hadn't expected it to spread. I hadn't even planned to check. But there it was, pinging notifications like applause I'd never asked for. Ryan found me in the hallway, holding a protein bar and grinning. "You're kind of famous." I blinked. "What?" "That article. Someone posted it to LinkedIn. A few of the partners were talking about it during the 8 a.m. meeting. No names, obviously, but... Claire, it was powerful." My stomach twisted, not with regret, but with a kind of trembling certainty. The truth was out now, and there was no stuffing it back into silence. Around noon, Linda left me a voicemail. Her voice wavered between hurt and righteous anger. "Claire, I don't know why you'd want to hurt us like this. People are talking. The neighbors, my colleagues. You're making the family look bad. Please call me back. We can fix this. We have to." I didn't respond. 30 minutes later, my phone rang again. Sophie. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but something inside me, maybe curiosity, maybe resolve, picked it up. "You're humiliating us," she spat before I could speak. "No," I said evenly. "I told the truth. You're the one ashamed of it." There was a pause. Then the line went dead. That night, my inbox pinged with a message from a podcast producer. "Would you be willing to speak about your story? We're doing a series on hidden financial abuse in families." I stared at the screen for a long time. I hadn't planned on being a voice for anything, but maybe this wasn't just about my story anymore. As I gathered my notes, prepping for the interview the next day, my phone buzzed again. A new text. From Dad. "We need to talk. Alone." He used to be the calm one. Now he looks like the man who'd finally lost control. The cafe was half empty, humming with espresso machines and quiet jazz. I arrived early and chose a corner table, near the window, away from the counter. Neutral ground. Not a home, not an office, not Maple Street. Edward entered right on time. He wore the same beige windbreaker he'd had since I was a teenager. It looked smaller on him now, more worn. His steps hesitated when he saw me. "Claire," he said, attempting a smile. "You look, well." I didn't offer the same pleasantries. "Let's not pretend this is a social visit." He sat slowly, folded his hands, glanced at the barista like searching for a lifeline. "Coffee?" I already ordered. A silence stretched between us like a bridge made of dry twine. "You've made quite the stir," he said finally, tone attempting casual. "Which part?" I asked. "The unpaid bills I covered? Or the part where you gifted my investment as a PR stunt?" His jaw tightened. I reached into my bag and slid a manila folder across the table. Inside, printed in black ink, was every line of the spreadsheet I'd compiled. Payments. Dates. Total, $165,492. He flipped through the first few pages. His fingers fumbled slightly. His face, the father who once lectured me about budgeting, paled. "I never saw all this," he muttered. "You didn't want to." He began. "Your mother thought giving the house to Sophie and Ethan would help secure her place. Brandon's family is influential. Appearances matter." "And I was convenient," I said flatly. "An invisible bank account dressed as a daughter." "That's not fair." "What's not fair?" I said, voice sharp now. "Is rewriting history to fit your guilt. I didn't just help you. I carried you. Mortgage, repairs, bills, all while you told me I was investing in something that turned out to be a lie." Well, his lips parted, then shut again. "I'm not here for apologies," I continued. "I'm here to be clear. There's no more money, no more support. I'm not your fixer. Claire, if you ever need housing advice," I said, standing, "I recommend finding a landlord who doesn't share your DNA." I picked up my bag. He didn't stand. "You're making a mistake," he said softly. I met his eyes for one last time. "Number, I'm correcting yours." They said it was just a dinner, but every chair was arranged for war. The table was too long, the lighting too soft, and the waitress too rehearsed. I knew before the first menu hit the linen that this wasn't about reconnecting. It was about repositioning. Linda smiled when she saw me, all pearls and practiced warmth. Edward sat beside her, quiet, eyes downcast, like he was still recovering from our last conversation. The table for 4 had one empty seat. Sophie's absence wasn't mentioned. "Claire," my mother said, rising for a hug I didn't return. "You look radiant." "Let's not waste anyone's time," I said as I sat. "Why are we here?" She let the compliment wither on her lips. "I thought we could talk. As family, things have gotten strained. You gave away the house I paid for, then got upset when I talked about it." Linda folded her napkin, twice, then again. "We didn't mean to hurt you, truly. But your father and I are in a difficult situation now. The apartment lease is ending. We didn't plan for this." "You didn't plan at all," I said. She sighed. "The lake house. There it is." I leaned back. "I was wondering when you'd say it. We just thought, temporarily, since it's empty most weekends." I stared at her. "I paid for your comfort. You cut me out. And now I owe you shelter?" Her eyes shimmered. Not tears. Rage, barely veiled as disappointment. "We gave you life. And I gave you a mortgage-free house," I said, voice even. "We're even." Edward looked away. The waitress brought our salads. No one touched them. Linda straightened her spine, pearls glinting like armor. "You're colder than I thought." "No," I said, standing. "I've just stopped setting myself on fire to keep you warm." They inherited a house, not the woman who held it together. The maple trees lining the street had started to curl into summer gold, but the house looked tired. Paint peeled beneath the second-story windows. The grass, once manicured, now fought against weeds taller than the mailbox. I parked half a block down and stayed in the car, engine off, watching. A neighbor, Mrs. Kim, emerged from her porch with a watering can. I rolled down the window and waved. "Oh, Claire," she called, surprised. "I haven't seen you in ages. I was just telling Mark the other day. The roof started leaking again." I glanced at the shingles, sagging under years of deferred upkeep. "Is that right?" She leaned closer, her voice dropping. "Last week, a fire truck showed up. Kitchen mishap, they said. Smoke damage, but still." "Everyone okay?" She nodded, then added, "No one seems to care for the place like you used to." I thanked her and drove off before she could ask more. At home, Naomi was waiting with takeout and the same look she always gave me when she was about to say, "I told you so," but softened it with wine. "You see this?" she asked, holding up her phone. Sophie's Instagram, once a curated grid of brunches, vacations, and designer throws, now replaced by moody black and white quotes. One read, "Growth hurts, so does betrayal." "Classy," I muttered. "She's spiraling," Naomi said, scrolling. "Even deleted the kitchen remodel photos. And look, Ethan at a gala, no Sophie." A silence settled between us until Naomi spoke again, quieter now. "I know you didn't want this to happen. Not like this." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The next morning, a thick envelope waited on my doorstep. No return address. Inside, a glossy photo, clearly taken with a phone from across the street. The back door of the house was scorched black, charred splinters where the frame used to be. A caption scrawled in red ink on the back. "Thought you should know." I placed it on the table, fingers steady. Naomi picked it up and whistled low. "You think they'll ask you to help again?" I met her eyes without blinking. "I think they're about to learn what no really means." They didn't knock. They announced. The intercom buzzed just as I was rinsing my coffee mug, early evening light painting golden bars across my hardwood floor. I pressed the button, expecting a delivery. "Yes?" "It's us, honey." My mother's voice chirped through the speaker. "Surprise." My chest tightened. I hadn't given them the building code in over a year. 30 seconds later, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Linda holding a lasagna dish covered in foil, and Edward behind her with a bottle of that Riesling they used to bring out every Christmas. "We thought it'd be nice to have dinner," Linda said, stepping in before I could respond. I let them in. Out of habit? Politeness? I wasn't sure anymore. They sat at my kitchen island like they'd never betrayed me. My father poured wine. My mother started talking about a new medication her doctor had prescribed, the weather near Lake Michigan, how Sophie was taking time off social media to focus on healing. The word healing was thick in her throat, as if trauma had hit her, not me. After 10 minutes, I stopped the polite nodding. "What do you want?" They looked at each other. Edward cleared his throat. "The fire damage was worse than we thought. The house needs major repairs." "Not my house," I corrected. "Sophie's, remember?" My mother's voice softened. "We were thinking maybe we could stay at the lake house, just for a few months until we figure things out." I leaned back. "Did you figure things out before giving away the house I paid for?" Linda blinked. "Claire, don't be harsh. I'm still dealing with my arthritis. And Sophie needs a quiet space to recover," Edward added. "They've had some tension." I stood and walked to the window. My back to them, I said, "You want me to house the people who erased me? You're asking the person you betrayed for sanctuary." "We're family," Linda whispered. "You wouldn't really leave us homeless." I turned slowly, meeting her eyes without flinching. "You left me houseless first." Her mouth opened, then closed. "I am not your backup plan," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I'm your consequence." The silence that followed was sharp enough to split glass. Apologies don't cost much, but does accountability. He showed up in a pressed shirt and tired eyes, standing in the glass doorway of our office conference room like a man unsure if he was welcome in his own daughter's life. 10 minutes, Edward said, his voice quieter than I remembered. "That's all I ask." I gestured for him to sit. The walls were transparent, but the space between us felt more private than the years we'd spent in the same house. He sat across from me, his hands folded tightly like he was afraid they'd betray him. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he began, eyes focused on a fixed point beyond my shoulder. "More than I have in years." I said nothing. He continued. "I used to think that keeping peace was the same as keeping love. If I didn't challenge your mother, if I smoothed things over, everything would stay okay. Peace without fairness isn't peace," I said. "It's control." He nodded. Slowly. "That's what I'm starting to understand." There was no rage in his tone, just exhaustion. And something else: grief. She told me giving the house to Sophie would anchor her future. I didn't push back. I thought maybe it was true. But Sophie and Ethan are separating. That surprised me, but I didn't flinch. He continued, Ethan's family is under investigation. Financial issues. Sophie's panicking. I folded my arms. So the anchor is slipping. Edward chuckled bitterly. You always had a way of saying it clean. I waited. I've started therapy, he said finally. By myself, no one else. It's humbling. For a moment, I didn't recognize him. The man who once measured strength by silence was now unraveling his own fabric. Carefully. I know this doesn't undo anything, he said, but I don't want to lose you forever. Even if your mother never changes, I want to be different. For me, for you. I studied his face, the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the sincerity that had arrived decades too late, but maybe not fatally so. I want to rebuild, he said, if you're willing. I let the silence stretch between us like a bridge. Not built yet, but no longer impossible. Show me with your actions, I said, not your apologies. They painted over my height chart, and now the house is empty. The Maple Street home sat like a forgotten monument, faded shutters blinking against the wind. I hadn't planned to slow down, but as my car crept along the curb, something pulled me back. Not the structure itself, but what I used to believe it held. Its lawn, once meticulously trimmed by Edward every Saturday morning, was now overgrown and patchy. The mailbox leaned at an angle, as if it too had given up receiving anything but regret. A faded for sale sign rested crooked in the front yard, barely anchored, like it had second thoughts about standing. I didn't get out. Just stared through the windshield as if my past might open the door and wave. The windows were hollow. Nothing in the glass reflected home anymore. I could almost see the echo of a younger version of me. 8 years old, curled beneath the stairs during thunderstorms, clutching a flashlight and a journal, scribbling promises to myself about the woman I would become. I remembered the night I helped paint the living room, my palms sticky with roller marks and my heart full of hope. Laughter bubbled up from the entryway. Shoes came off. Bottles of wine were unwrapped. Someone cued music in the background. I opened the door wider and stepped aside. Welcome to my house, I said, a hand sweeping over the space I built from scratch. Every inch of it. She gave everything for a family that counted her out, until she counted the cost. In the end, it wasn't the house they stole that mattered, but the dignity she reclaimed when she stopped apologizing for speaking the truth. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but it resonates long and deep once it's heard. Sometimes it only takes one voice to break generations of silence. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment your thoughts below. Type 1 if you resonate with this story. I patched that roof. I replaced the water heater. I paid to make this house stand. But now it was just walls. I closed my eyes and said it aloud, softly, as if speaking to a ghost. I paid for its survival. But I won't die with it. Letting go didn't feel like a victory. It felt like air returning to lungs that forgot how to breathe. I rolled the window down for just a second. The breeze carried nothing familiar. Just dust. Maybe mildew. Maybe freedom. I was about to pull away when my phone buzzed. Naomi, I answered. Hey. Her voice, electric with energy, came through. They saw your article reposted. You've been invited to speak, national level, like real platform, Claire. For a moment, I stared at the crooked sign one last time. Good, I said. It's time to build something new. I stopped chasing family approval. That's when I started building something real. The applause still rang in my ears as I stepped off the stage. The conference lights dimmed, but the fire in my chest didn't. My panel on financial abuse had drawn a full house. People cried. They nodded. They clapped not just for my words, but because they saw themselves in them. I hadn't expected a standing ovation. I hadn't expected to feel seen. Back at the lake house that night, the air was cooler, fall brushing against the windows with a gentler hand than summer ever did. Naomi and Ryan arrived early, bringing Thai takeout and 2 bottles of red wine. We didn't talk about the past. We didn't need to. It hovered there like a ghost we'd already laid to rest. Before dinner, I opened my laptop to upload a new article. I titled it, "When Loyalty Becomes Leverage." I didn't need to name names. The words were enough. I was enough. A ping broke the quiet. An email from Edward. "Still in therapy. I'm learning to listen without trying to fix. Thank you for planting the seeds." Simple. Director. No expectations. I replied with a thumbs-up emoji and smiled. It was the first message from him that didn't ache. An hour later, another email came in. From Linda. It was long, rambling, equal parts apology and defense. "We thought we were doing what was best. You always seemed so strong. I didn't know how to balance 2 daughters with such different needs." I reread it twice, then responded, "Thank you for writing. I'm still healing. Please respect that." I didn't send anything else. She didn't deserve more than that boundary. Dinner that night felt like the family I'd always tried to build. Naomi laughed too loud. Ryan teased her about it. We passed food around like communion, each bite a soft reaffirmation that I wasn't alone. Not anymore. Toward the end of the meal, I stood and raised my glass. To families we choose, and the homes we build with boundaries. They clinked their glasses to mine, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was holding the weight of anyone else's roof on my back. As the dishes were cleared and the others trickled out, Ryan lingered. He leaned against the doorframe, hands tucked in his pockets, eyes tracing the lake. "You know," he said, his voice lower than usual. "The way you handled all this, it's inspiring." I glanced up, smirking faintly. Healing isn't quiet, but it's worth the noise. I no longer want the house. I want what it taught me to demand. The sunlight spilled through the east-facing windows, catching the warm gold of the hardwood floors. Lincoln Park had always been a dream. Too polished, too expensive, too not for people like me. Until now. I stood in the center of my new living room, barefoot, holding a paint roller. The accent wall would be clay red, bold and grounding. I wasn't painting over anything painful. This wall had no ghosts, just potential. The smell of fresh paint mixed with brewed coffee from the kitchen. I'd spent the morning arranging everything exactly how I wanted. No compromises, no borrowed furniture, no inherited bitterness. The couch was plush and the bookshelf massive. A nook near the window held a reading chair I'd never had space for before. I walked into the guest room, soft blues and cream linens, and placed a small sign on the nightstand. "Rest without debt." I smiled to myself. It wasn't just decoration, it was declaration. In the hallway, I hung the framed quote I'd carried with me since my last therapy session. "The price of silence is everything. The reward of voice is freedom." The blog post was scheduled to go live that afternoon. Title: Boundaries, the Real Inheritance. It wasn't scathing. It was sober, fierce, clear-eyed. I didn't need to win anymore. I just needed to speak. A knock at the door broke the stillness. Naomi was first, balancing a tray of homemade cinnamon rolls. Ryan followed with flowers and a crooked grin. Others trailed in behind them. Colleagues, neighbors, friends who'd become family by showing up when my blood didn't.